Hey, Marcus House with you here, and really fun stuff today. Starship and Starbase work screaming along. The Axiom Space 2 mission conducts amazing research before returning home. With the huge success of Crew Dragon's 10th crewed flight though, where is Starliner and why is there another pushback to its first crewed flight? We have brand new footage from the Artemis 1 mission, more humans in orbit than ever before, and much more.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
A new week, and the work around the orbital launch mount continues to be a major focus. The sheer amount of pilings being dug and filled with concrete this week is just astounding. It is starting to look like the work with the massive rotary piling rigs is slowing down though, with loads of equipment removed from the site. The next step has been intriguing to watch. The process for creating the full foundation system for the steel sandwich is complex, so introducing sheet pilings. The crew have been driving in loads of these, but what are they for? They have a broad application actually, but in this case, they are needed to prevent unstabilised soil from caving in or loads of water from seeping through. After all, the launch site is located inside wetlands where the water table is pretty much right below the surface there. The next step, we assume, will be to dig away some of that soil around the orbital launch mount base to clear the way. As we can already see by these pieces, the pile casings are in the process of being cut down. This is to ensure the concrete and rebar are exposed enough to be fully incorporated in the pile cap. What exactly is a pile cap though? Well, at the top we will eventually have the water-cooled steel sandwich, and at the bottom the many separate pilings. What this pile cap does is provides the interface layer between the heavy load at the top and the pilings underneath the steel plate system. For this pile cap, I'm sure that SpaceX will create a mesh of rebar, which has already been delivered on site by many trucks and dropped off right here. So let's just quickly go back in time a few years. Check this out. Something very similar can be seen being done here for the base of the launch tower when that was in construction. The support needed for that was obviously gigantic, so once that rebar work has been completed here, it's going to be time to bring in the concrete trucks to connect it all together. The continuous flight auger drilling rigs are still working flat out near the water deluge tanks. There is another pipe being welded together with what looks to be at least 3 T-joints. Now this is a little speculative, but based on that, I'm expecting to see at least 3 more tanks incoming soon. Close by, we can see that SpaceX has welded 2 short extensions to the already laid pipes for the deluge system. They've also encased them in concrete, and hopefully they will extend this out further. It's looking just a little odd currently with the smaller of the 2 sticking out the side there. The exposed pieces of the pipe have also since been painted white. The orbital tank farm progress continues, with the drilling rig having dug loads of new pilings there too. As expected, SpaceX is in the middle of expanding the walls surrounding the existing horizontal methane storage tanks. I suspect that this is all in preparation for the arrival of the new tanks. For safety and as regulatory requirements, propellants are separated by a barrier of some sort for pretty obvious reasons. It isn't a big barrier in this case, so it's unlikely that we're going to see the new tanks being used to store liquid oxygen. I think instead that will remain in some of the vertical tanks for the near future. Now, if you recall from just after the launch, we talked a little about the fact that these trailer generators are required at Starbase due to this site not being hooked up with 3-phase power. That is not ideal given that the team need to continuously refuel them, and we had a feeling that this would become a thing of the past pretty soon. Well, since then, a huge trench has been dug from the build site towards the launch site. It looks like those massive power cables are now being laid, so there should soon indeed be a true power supply for the Starbase launch site shortly. In fact, they've recently already taken the generators away. This, I believe, means that they are not currently able to use the huge equipment at the site. Equipment such as the orbital tank farm motors or the drawworks hoist that powers the tower arms, at least not until everything is connected back up. I think given the fact that the full orbital tank farm doesn't currently have any cryogenics left in it, this would be the prime moment to switch these systems over to the main lines. So this brings us to the build site. Just as last week's video went live, Booster 10 popped out of the Mega Bay just after it had been lifted onto its new transport stand. SpaceX, by the way, lifts these boosters using this rig. By linking up the 2 bridge cranes inside the Mega Bay, that increases the lifting capacity. So the booster made its way onto Highway 4, headed towards the Sanchez site to take a nice tour of the facilities, and then ended up right next to Booster 4. Just as a great overview here with this brilliant image by Starbase Surfer, left to right we have Booster 10, Booster 4, Ship 15, 27 and number 20. Close by, Ship 26 still on the engine installation stand. There is nothing to be alarmed about with Booster 10 being moved to the Rocket Garden. Remember, SpaceX uses this location not just to store the old obsolete vehicles, but also to store future flight vehicles. After all, Ship 24 sat here before its big flight. Ship 29 stacking rapidly continues as well, with its thrust section now making an appearance and moving towards the high bay. We have loads more progress with the parts for the new mega bay. All 4 sections for the second layer are now fully assembled, with multiple being decked out with cladding. In fact, one of the main sections for the third layer is also being assembled. The mega bay itself now has the first layer pretty much finished, except for the cladding. To aid in the construction, the LR11000 crane has been fully built up now. This is the very same crane that was previously at the Roberts Road site in Florida. As extra evidence for any doubters, just check out the red jib there. Yes, definitely the same crane. Over at the expansion for the Star Factory, the concrete flooring has expanded quite nicely. However, there are still a few pieces missing. Those areas will soon be filled in once it has been cleared out. Now, I haven't talked about this pit here, but to me, that looks like a location for a hydraulic press that could perform die stamping. Such parts are used in different parts of the Starship build process, things like stringers or even the main panels for the domes and nose cones. Adding more on-site manufacturing here could help reduce shipping costs and optimize the ship and booster prototype builds even more. Now, I did mention last week that the Star Factory will expand all the way towards Highway 4, but there are still a few buildings in its way, or should I say, were in its way. Yeah, after about 4 years, we got to say goodbye to the low bay in quite a spectacular fashion. First, one half was toppled, and then the other half. They sure didn't waste any time cleaning up the remains of that. That wasn't all. 2 other buildings close by for ground fabrication and the presumed propulsion building were both heavily in the process of being taken down. Yeah, the skyline there is changing rapidly. So let's head all the way down the road to the Massey site. See this? Here we have foundations for more footings. Perhaps the plan is to install some of these cryogenic tanks that are stored at the back of the site. Right next to that, we have the remains of Booster 6. That test really did shred that tank. This should be the future location where SpaceX performs cryogenic testing on booster prototypes. Instead of doing these tests at Starbase moving forward, which interrupts the work there, they should now do a lot of the testing right here. Similar to Starbase work, it looks like all of the main pilings have been finished up and the work on the rebar will soon start. Now, it has been a while since we've revisited the Florida site, so let's hop in that helicopter with Greg Scott. First stop, SpaceX's Roberts Road facility. To say that everything here has slowed down considerably puts it lightly. Everything that was intended for building the high bay has now been removed, and as we've been showing the last month or so, it is pretty much all now at Starbase, Texas, including of course that missing crane mentioned earlier. You will notice though that Hangar X and the associated buildings remain buzzing with activity. Greg has actually had a tour in here and was blown away. You may not realise this, but inside, SpaceX are not only refurbishing the flown boosters getting ready to fly, such as this one outside, but also general Falcon 9 assembly work is going on. Now I'm just going to take you to another site from that same flight. Yes, Blue Origin. I've got to say that since being awarded the Lunar Lander contract a few weeks ago, this is going to be a key location to start paying more attention to. It has been a while since we've had some concrete updates on New Glenn. This building here though is purely dedicated to second stage cleaning and testing. Inside here we believe is a New Glenn second stage test article. That is pretty exciting to see. Blue Origin is hopefully still planning on the first flight of New Glenn in 2024, so we expect to be seeing a lot more from the site here in the upcoming months. Massive thanks to Greg Scott getting back up into the air again. That's all to make sure that we don't miss anything going on at the Cape site. Please do consider helping him out there on Patreon and subscribing to his content to help support what he does here. And thanks of course to you for being a subscriber right here so that we can make these happen. It helps us all out more than you can possibly imagine. So after the incredible mission to the International Space Station, the Axiom 2 crew have returned from their 10-day mission in space. After bidding farewell to the station, SpaceX's Dragon undocked. Sadly, during undocking, the station was in total darkness, but shortly after, the view lit back up as the spacecraft passed back into the sunlight. The webcast ended as SpaceX began the process of returning Crew Dragon Freedom to the surface. We never really get to see a lot of the interesting operations that occurred during that event. Dragon needs to conduct multiple orbit-lowering maneuvers using its Draco thrusters, and it then jettisons its trunk, which is left to burn up in the atmosphere. The capsule itself is reused, of course, and this one has now visited the space station and returned twice now, and its first time it was carrying these 4 crew here on Crew 4. That sounded weird, didn't it? Anyway, a new stream popped up live showing the splashdown off the coast of Florida on Tuesday around 11 PM local time. It was an epic moment seeing the Axiom team leaving the vehicle, the legendary Commander Peggy Whitson there. Do a little research on her and you'll just be amazed at what she's done in her career. Well, she is not done yet. We then had pilot John Schaffner and the mission specialists, Rihanna Barnawi and Ali Alkiani, all disembarking there safe and sound. On that mission, they conducted around 20 diverse experiments and much more. Just these 3 STEM outreach projects in particular I thought were most interesting. Working with DreamUp and NanoRacks, this liquid fireworks experiment aimed to demonstrate differences in fluid behaviour on Earth versus in space. This heat transfer experiment to compare results with microgravity, even these space kites to explore their aerodynamic behaviour in this environment. With all that, these live events streaming out to almost 12,000 students at dozens of locations. Just imagine being able to be a student in those classrooms, asking questions and engaging in all of this. Do have a read of all of the amazing work done on this mission, it'll blow your mind. So what is coming up next for Axiom Space? Well, a mission order has already been signed for the 3rd Axiom mission to the International Space Station. Last we heard, that could be happening around November this year. The one head-scratcher when it comes to the success of the 10th crewed mission of Dragon with Axiom 2 is this update here about Boeing's Starliner. The launch date of this has been pushed a bunch of times already. Just days ago, it was expected that we would be seeing this flight in July. Nope, not as of Thursday. Did you see this news? Starliner has been pushed way back for an unspecified period of time. 95% of the crew flight test certification items are complete, but tasks such as work on the active thermal control need to be done. As if that wasn't enough work, new issues keep on surfacing. One of the valves for its attitude control system did fail, but that was quickly replaced before propellant was loaded onto the vehicle. Sadly, that is where the good news ends though. Apparently, the softer links of Starliner's parachutes had a lower limit than expected, so they need to reassess the parachute systems. NASA actually requires the spacecraft to be able to land safely even if one of the 3 chutes fail during the descent. It currently can't with a sufficient margin. Next, adhesive tape that was used in Starliner to tape up wiring turns out to be flammable, posing another risk. Boeing is currently hard at work investigating whether they need to partially disassemble the capsule just to fix this tape issue. I'm a tad surprised to still be seeing this kind of work going on so close to the big event, but a crewed orbital test mission is no joke. We want to see a perfect flight this time around, and if that means a few more months of testing and improving, so be it. Throughout the past year, both Boeing and NASA together have worked on solving the anomalies of the Orbital Flight Test 2 mission. That mission, of course, was essentially a repeat of the unsuccessful Orbital Flight Test 1 mission, which couldn't even make it to the space station due to a whole host of problems, many of which were software related. Even though the spacecraft did manage to dock with the ISS on its 2nd attempt and perform a successful landing back later, Starliner still suffered some pretty detrimental thruster failures. 2 out of its 12 orbital maneuvering and attitude control thrusters failed at orbital insertion, and then 2 of its RCS thrusters shut down during the ISS approach. Along with all of that, there were issues with the docking ring and thermal cooling system, so almost all of the issues faced during the 2nd mission had been solved according to NASA and Boeing, which seemed like great news, but we can only hope that the teams will handle all these new anomalies efficiently so we can once again see a new estimated flight date. A few neat Falcon 9 and Starlink updates for you. Certainly less activity than the week prior, with Falcon 9 only taking one flight this week. Tuesday evening, another 52 Starlink satellites were preparing to take flight from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. A nice, clear night, and under all that ice and venting, a very dirty booster. Yes, this was its 14th flight, with the most notable probably being the Crew 1, Crew 2, and Transporter 4 and 5 missions. A beautiful launch lighting up the entire area, and one shot that always gets to me is this one here. I love to do the time-lapse of this because it really shows those individual plumes from all 9 engines merging together as the atmosphere thins out. I just love it when they don't cut away from this shot. Stage separation and the booster coast phase heading to perform that magic drone ship landing. But I want to first just share one example of Starlink's success here with this news story popping up recently. In Australia, our fast internet is mostly provided by the National Broadband Network, or NBN. If you are lucky enough to live in the right area like I am right here, that gives you a wonderful fibre optic connection straight to your home. In rural areas though, things are not so rosy, and Starlink is absolutely taking this region by storm.
Shari, the NBN is getting absolutely smashed by Elon Musk. The NBN lost 4,000 customers last week, and in the last 3 weeks, it's lost 8,000 customers.
Yeah, that is just from my neck of the woods, and if you imagine globally, you can just imagine the impact this is making. I think scenarios just like this are the most interesting. After years of struggling with bad internet, a farm manager in northwest Victoria simply strapped Starlink kits to his tractors while sowing. That is a neat example of Starlink on the move, which is essentially providing a Wi-Fi bubble around the farm machinery. Yes, that's pretty cool, isn't it? Back to the 14th landing of this booster, and honestly, I just love watching these no matter how many we see. This was landing 196. Only a few more to go now until they hit that 200th recovery. Falcon 9 is going to leave quite the legacy behind. Greg Scott actually caught this shot of a different booster that flew the Arabsat mission last week. That had also flown 14 times. Early in the week, China launched its Shenzhou 16 mission carrying 3 taikonauts to the Tiangong space station. But first, I want to just share a big thank you to all of you, as well as Henson Shaving supporting this video and many others. Henson Shaving approached us almost a year ago, and I'm so glad they did. You right there though, you're the reason why they have continued supporting what we do here. Yeah, you love the product, and while most companies focus on gimmicky multi-blade technologies and expensive cartridges, Henson Shaving came at this design problem from their existing experience in aerospace. Yes, making parts for the ISS, satellites and Mars probes, the machining precision needed for this razor is very similar. The result is a shaving experience like no other. Once you try it, you'll never want to go back to conventional razors. I think this here is an interesting graphic which shows a super zoomed in example of how picky they are about that precision. That sliver of green is the zone that the blade exposure must be measured within for the razor to be considered in spec. That's impressive alone, but added to that, every component of the razor is recyclable, even the packaging that it arrives in. Let's face it, the conventional cartridge razors you've probably been using may seem advanced, but they're actually just draining your wallet. Most have blades that bend and flex due to being supported by plastics, and they just end up skipping across your skin. This is exactly what leads to irritation. They dull quickly, and they generate excessive plastic waste for landfills. In stark contrast, the Henson razor embraces a classic approach, instead using standard double-sided blades that only cost about 10 cents each. In fact, they are offering a 100 pack completely free to you for helping support my channel here. Just go to hensonshaving.com, select a razor color, and make sure to have that 100 blade pack in your cart. Once you enter in the code Marcus in the final step of the checkout process, those blades will pop up free. Thanks again to Henson Shaving for their support, and a special shout out to you for helping to redefine the shaving experience. So yes, China launched its Shenzhou 16 mission with the 3 taikonauts on board. Great scenes from the launch pad here as the Long March 2F rocket lifts off and hurls the crew past Max Q. Now, this shot in particular is intriguing to me. Did you see it? I must admit I've never really noticed this before, but just before booster cutoff, you can see that the 4 side boosters separate, followed by the separation of the core stage pretty much immediately after. So why not just separate the core stage and drop it with the side boosters attached? Do let me know in the comments if you've got any insight on that, because I'm quite curious there. With this successful launch, the total number of humans in low Earth orbit was, at the time, 17, which is the highest ever. 11 were on the ISS, which includes the Axiom 2 crew before their return, and then the 6 taikonauts aboard the Chinese space station. One fun thing to think about is that the record for the total number of people in space could actually be considered a little more grey than that. Just last week, for a few minutes, there were 20 people in space if we want to include the Virgin Galactic flight with the 6 crew on board. Personally, I don't count it. I'm a 100 kilometres and up kind of guy, but you do you. Regardless, it is incredible to see this competitive industry clearly busier than ever. As a neat surprise, NASA dropped some fresh highlight footage from the Artemis 1 mission. It was really neat to see some of these new perspectives at such high quality. This clip is looking up from the Orion capsule as the launch abort system was jettisoned. We then have this multi-angle view from all the 4 cameras on the solar arrays as they deployed. I think this is actually my favourite clip from this new video, but beautiful shots of the moon's surface there, which I think we'd seen before. Then this great shot, which is again looking from Orion upward as it re-enters the atmosphere at about Mach 32. If you look closely, you can even see other debris burning up at the bottom of the frame. So that, my friends, is it for another week. Not quite as much launch activity as we saw the previous week, but wow, did we still have a lot to pack into that one. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit that subscribe so that we can keep making them. If you would like to help more directly like all these many people, all of these support options make a colossal difference to us. It really does. If you want to continue the journey, the algorithm there thinks that you will enjoy this video here next, or maybe these videos. Thanks for watching all this way through, and I'll see you all in the next video.